So it seems you're interested in taking a deep dive into Plato's Republic.
The classic.
Yeah, we've got quite a selection of excerpts you've given us, touching on things from justice to art, and even that famous allegory of the cave.
Oh, great one.
It seems like you're really keen on grasping Plato's concept of an ideal society, and how individuals would function within that.
Well, the Republic is, I mean, it's a cornerstone, of Western philosophy. And I think by examining these excerpts, we can definitely uncover some of his core arguments
So,
about human nature, governance, and even the pursuit of knowledge itself.
right. And maybe starting with justice, because it's such a core theme running through the Republic, right? And especially in these early dialogues, we see Socrates really challenging conventional views of what justice even is.
Right, right. He uses his signature method of questioning to
Yeah.
kind of break down these traditional definitions of justice,
Yeah.
like telling the truth or paying debts
Oh,
by
yeah.
examining whether they hold up,
Yeah.
in sort of extreme cases. So
Like if someone's gone mad, should you still return a weapon to them?
exactly,
Right.
exactly. That kind of forces us to confront the limitations of these simple definitions
Right.
and, think about the potential consequences of adhering blindly to those rules.
Yeah, and then you have Thrasymachus coming in with that
Oh, a very bold claim.
bold claim, right? That my makes right, and that justice basically just serves the interests of the
We're
stronger.
stronger, yeah.
So that throws a bit of a wrench in things.
It does. And, Socrates counters this by arguing that, well, a ruler's interest might not always align with what's actually good for them.
Right, like they could be making a mistake.
Exactly, exactly. There's fallibility there.
So this whole back and forth between Socrates and Thrasymachus really does raise some fundamental questions
Oh, absolutely.
about the nature of power and its relationship with justice, right?
Right, right.
Because it's saying, well, true justice can't just be dictated by those in power. It has to be rooted in something deeper.
Exactly. A deeper understanding of those moral principles. Yeah.
Now, moving on, we get to Plato's, his rather intriguing and maybe controversial stance on art.
Yeah, I'd say.
His view on art is,
Thought-provoking.
yeah, especially when it comes to poetry, like Homer's works.
Well, he argues, and this is really fascinating, that art, because it's an imitation of reality, is inherently thrice removed from the truth. And this is connected to his theory of forms.
Right.
So he's saying, the true perfect versions of things, the forms,
Yeah.
those exist in the realm of ideas.
Right.
Art is merely imitating the physical world,
Right.
which itself is an imitation of those perfect forms.
So art's kind of falling short in conveying true knowledge then, in his view.
Exactly. It's just replicating appearances. And he actually suggests that certain narratives, the ones he deems harmful to developing ideal citizens, those should even be censored.
Wow. Which raises all sorts of questions
Big questions.
about art's place in society then, right?
Huge, yeah.
How much it can influence individuals and their perception of the world.
Absolutely. The whole tension between artistic expression and the potential consequences, for moral development and such.
Right. Well, let's turn to maybe one of the most iconic, enduring passages from the Republic, the allegory of the cave.
Ooh, a good one.
And this really serves to kind of vividly illustrate Plato's ideas
Yes.
about those limits of human perception
Right.
and just how challenging the journey to true knowledge can be.
Yeah, picture it. A group of prisoners, their whole lives chained in this cave. They're facing a blank wall, right? All they know are the shadows that are projected onto that wall.
Right, by these objects passing in front of a fire behind them.
Exactly. And they think those shadows, that's reality, completely oblivious to the true objects and the source of the light itself.
So then one of these prisoners he breaks free from those chains, right?
He does, and he ascends out of the cave into that, blinding sunlight,
Right.
which is overwhelming at first, of course.
Yeah, he's struggling to adjust.
He is
But gradually, he starts to perceive the actual forms of the objects that were casting those shadows.
right. And eventually he sees the sun, the ultimate source of light and truth. And he understands now the illusory nature of that cave reality.
And then full of this newfound knowledge, he tries to return to the cave to tell the others. Right.
Oh, he does, but they don't believe him. They actually threaten him.
It's a powerful illustration of how difficult it is to break free from ignorance.
It is.
And then even try to share that understanding with others who are so entrenched in their limited worldview.
Right, they're just so used to their own reality, that they reject anything that challenges it.
So if we take this allegory, that cave symbolizes the limitations of our senses and how we can be trapped by our own preconceived notions, right?
Exactly.
The
Exactly.
shadows are these superficial appearances of the world, and the journey out of the cave represents that difficult but ultimately, rewarding pursuit of philosophical inquiry.
Yeah, it really makes you reflect on whether you're clinging to shadows or truly seeking, the source of knowledge and light.
So how do we, if we're following Plato, how do we escape this metaphorical cave?
He emphasizes education, specifically in philosophy, as the way to break free from those limitations.
Okay.
He proposes a really rigorous curriculum, including mathematics, astronomy, and ultimately culminating in what he calls dialectic.
And what's dialectic?
It's the art of, logical reasoning.
Okay.
That process of like questioning and engaging in discourse in order to really arrive at the truth.
So this educational journey is not just about accumulating information, right?
Right.
It's about developing a specific kind of individual, someone who can discern truth from falsehood,
Yes.
lead others towards that enlightenment.
Exactly. And that's who he calls philosopher kings.
Right. So philosopher kings, what makes them so suitable for leadership then?
Well, they possess, first of all, wisdom,
Yeah.
courage, temperance, and of course, justice.
They're not just politicians.
Right.
They're philosophers who've reached that pinnacle of knowledge and virtue.
Exactly. They've dedicated themselves to the pursuit of truth.
Now, this idea of philosopher kings, it's pretty striking, right?
Oh, it is.
Because it's suggesting that true leadership shouldn't be about power
Not just power.
or popularity.
No.
It has to be about a deep understanding of philosophical principles.
Right. That ethical conduct.
And, we see that Plato's vision of an ideal state
Yeah.
with these philosopher kings in this very structured society, he puts forward some pretty, thought-provoking propositions.
He does. Like the idea of communal living for guardians
Yeah.
and a strict social hierarchy based on, individual aptitude.
Which he represents using this analogy of like
Yeah.
gold, silver, bronze, and iron.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Symbolizing those different capabilities within society.
And these are concepts that, they really challenge our modern sensibilities about, individuality
Yeah.
and equality.
They do.
They make us think critically about how society should be organized.
The balance between, individual needs and the collective good.
Right. What are the potential benefits, drawbacks of such a system?
Yeah.
What should guide us, right,
Absolutely.
in structuring a just and harmonious society?
Big questions.
Yeah, big questions indeed.
Let's dig a little deeper into this whole idea of the forms, especially how it ties into Plato's concept of justice.
Okay.
Both on an individual and societal level, it seems to come up quite a bit in the Republic.
Yeah, it does. So how does this concept of forms actually shape his perspective on, how to achieve true justice?
Well, for Plato, the form of justice, it's this perfect,
Yeah.
eternal, unchanging essence of what justice really is,
Right.
existing in the realm of forms, separate from our physical world.
So the justice that we encounter and try to, implement in our lives is just like
A reflection.
an imperfect attempt
Imperfect,
to
exactly.
kind of capture that essence.
Exactly. So achieving true justice for Plato, it's not just following laws or customs.
Right.
It's about aligning ourselves with this higher principle,
Yeah.
represented by that form of justice.
So it's more than just external rules and regulations then.
Oh, yeah. It requires looking inward,
Right.
examining our own beliefs and actions.
And this connects back to that idea of the philosopher king.
You got it. Because the philosopher king, having grasped these forms, they're the ones who can guide the state toward true justice.
So leadership for Plato isn't just about being politically savvy or wielding power.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah.
It's about that philosophical understanding that allows them to really discern what justice is.
Exactly. They embody these eternal principles.
Bro, so it's not just a politician, it's a philosopher
No,
leading.
philosopher king. Yeah.
And that really elevates philosophy in a way we don't often see in, modern politics.
It highlights the importance of wisdom,
Yeah.
intellectual rigor, a real commitment to truth.
Now let's shift gears a bit and go back to Plato's view on the role of art.
Okay.
We touched upon it earlier,
Right.
but it's worth exploring further.
Because his perspective, it can be seen as quite critical.
Oh, it is, stemming directly from his understanding of the forms.
So just to recap, he argued that art is thrice removed from the truth.
Exactly.
How does that tie into the theory of forms?
So for Plato, art is basically an imitation of the physical world,
Good.
which is itself just an imitation of the forms.
Right.
So art is even further removed.
Gotcha. So it's like a copy of a copy.
Yeah, it's misleading. It distracts us from real understanding by focusing on superficial appearances.
And I guess that's where he really takes issue with poetry.
Yes, especially poetry, right? The dramatic narratives, the emotional themes.
Yeah.
He felt it could sway people away from reason.
Which clashes with our modern view of art. We value how it inspires us, provokes thought.
It's true, but his critique encourages us to really think critically about art,
Yeah.
to consider its influence on us and on society.
Does art really lead us to truth and knowledge, or is it just entertainment?
It's a question worth asking.
Let's return to the allegory of the cave.
Oh, it's such a powerful image, really highlighting those limitations of human perception and the struggles we face in pursuing true knowledge.
Yeah, you have those prisoners chained in the cave their whole lives,
Yeah.
facing that blank wall, mistaking those shadows for reality.
They have no idea about the true objects or the light source.
None whatsoever.
So one prisoner breaks free.
Forced to turn around, face the fire.
It's got to be blinding.
It is.
Yeah.
At first, he can barely comprehend it.
Yeah, it's a painful adjustment, leaving that familiar world of shadows.
But as he adjusts, he starts to see the objects for what they are.
Okay.
No longer just shadows. Then he goes further, ascends out of the cave into the sunlight.
Wow.
That's the further stage of enlightenment.
Right.
He encounters the sun, the ultimate source of knowledge for Plato.
His whole understanding of reality has shifted.
Completely.
He's seen the truth, the illusory nature of the cave.
And he wants to share it.
Goes back to tell the others.
Tries to, but they don't believe him. They ridicule him. It's a classic tale of how hard it is to convince people to abandon their beliefs.
Even when those beliefs are misguided.
Right, so the cave symbolizes our limited senses,
Right.
how we get trapped by our own experiences, the shadows of those superficial appearances, and the journey out. That's the tough but rewarding path of philosophical inquiry.
Exactly. It's a call to question everything we think we know.
So how do we break free from this cave, according to Plato?
He emphasizes education, specifically in philosophy.
Okay.
It's about escaping those limitations. He lays out a curriculum, mathematics, astronomy,
Right.
leading to dialectic.
Now, remind us again, what is dialectic?
It's that art of reasoning,
Okay.
questioning, engaging in discourse to reach truth.
So it's active, not passive learning.
Exactly. It shapes individuals who can then lead a just society.
And those are the philosopher kings.
Yes.
What qualities do those philosopher kings have that make them fit to lead?
Well, they have wisdom, courage, temperance,
Okay.
and justice, of course.
It's not about power or popularity for them.
No, it's about understanding and living by those principles.
Plato's vision of this ideal state, though, does raise some interesting points.
It does. Ideas like communal living for the guardians.
Yeah.
A strict social hierarchy based on individual abilities.
He uses the gold, silver, bronze, iron analogy,
Yeah. To represent those different capabilities.
which kind of challenges our modern ideas of individuality and equality.
He does.
Forces us to think about how to balance individual needs with the needs of the whole society. Are there benefits to such a system? Drawbacks?
It's complex.
It is. And now let's look at another aspect of Plato's Republic that often sparks debate. His views on family.
Yes,
Yeah.
his proposals regarding family, especially among the guardians.
Yeah.
Those are definitely some of the most radical.
He argues for abolishing the traditional family structure,
Within the guardian class, yes.
suggesting instead communal child rearing,
Children raised collectively, biological parentage taking a back seat.
which is a pretty controversial idea.
It is. Challenging deeply held beliefs about family bonds.
Yeah, parental rights, things like that.
Raises concerns about potential emotional detachment, state control.
It's hard to fully embrace that part of his vision,
It is
but it does make us question our assumptions about
a
family.
role it plays, yeah.
Could there be other models that might foster a stronger sense of community?
It's worth considering.
It's clear that the Republic, even though it's written so long ago,
Yeah,
it still pushes us to think critically about what makes a just and well-ordered society.
it does. His ideas might not always sit well with our modern perspectives,
Right.
but they're valuable starting points for examining our own beliefs about justice, governance, and what it means to live a good life.
So going back to Plato's critique of art,
Right.
it really does challenge how we think about art today.
It does.
He seems particularly concerned about the power of art to influence us, to maybe lead us away from reason and truth.
Well, his concern stems from the idea that art, because it's an imitation of reality,
Right.
can actually stir emotions and shape our perceptions in a way that might,
Distract us from those things.
He was especially wary of poetry
Poetry.
and how it can evoke such strong emotions.
It's powerful.
Why was he so skeptical of art, especially poetry?
Well, if you remember, he believed that art is thrice removed from the truth
Right, right.
because it imitates the physical world, which itself is just an imitation of the forms.
Yeah.
So there's this distance, from true knowledge.
He's saying it's a copy of a copy.
Exactly. And that led him to question its value.
Especially those forms of art, like poetry.
Yes, with their dramatic narratives and strong emotions.
Right, it could pull people away from reason.
Towards those, less desirable impulses.
Which is interesting because today we often celebrate art for its emotional impact
We do, it's true.
and expressive power.
But for Plato, that was a concern
Yeah.
because appealing to our emotions and desires could disrupt the harmony of the soul.
Right. Leading us to act against reason.
Exactly.
Which I guess explains why he advocated for censorship. Censorship of certain forms of art, yes, the ones he deemed harmful.
To developing those virtuous citizens.
And a just society.
Which, of course, brings up a lot of questions
Big questions.
about artistic freedom,
Of course.
the role of the state.
Yeah, how much should they control creative expression?
It's a tough one.
It is.
But even if we don't agree with his solutions,
Right.
his concerns do encourage us to, really think about art.
To engage with it thoughtfully, critically,
Yeah.
consider its power.
Because it does have power
It does.
to shape how we see the world and to influence how we act.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on to, I guess, one of the cornerstones of Plato's philosophy,
Yeah.
the theory of forms.
Right, this concept that underpins so much of his thinking.
Yeah, and has profound implications for his ideal state.
So the theory of forms,
Yep.
it proposes that for every concept we have, like justice, beauty, truth,
Okay.
there's a perfect, eternal,
Yeah.
unchanging form that exists
Out there somewhere.
in a realm beyond our physical world.
So the things we experience in our daily lives are just
Copies, imperfect copies.
like shadows.
Shadows, exactly, of those true forms.
It's like the forms are the blueprints,
the blueprints, yeah.
and everything we see is built from those blueprints, but imperfectly.
Think of it like this. The forms are like perfect ideals.
Okay.
And the objects in our world are like their reflections
Right.
in a pool of water, distorted, incomplete, always changing.
So that explains why he's so skeptical of the physical world,
End of art.
because they're too far removed from the source.
From the true essence, the forms.
So true knowledge then comes from understanding the forms.
Yes.
But how do we even access them?
For Plato, it's through philosophy
Okay.
and cultivating our reason.
So we have to move beyond what our senses tell us.
Beyond those limitations, engage in real intellectual exploration.
That's like that journey out of the cave,
Exactly, leaving behind the shadows.
the shadows of our limited perceptions.
To reach that true knowledge of the forms.
And this theory of forms, it's had a huge impact
Oh, Matt.
on Western thought.
For centuries.
Right. It shaped how we think about reality.
And the pursuit of knowledge.
It's pretty amazing that an idea from ancient Greece
Yeah.
still has so much power today.
It makes us question what's real,
Push us to look for deeper understanding.
beyond what we see and experience.
Now, turning to Plato's understanding of the human soul.
Okay.
He had some pretty interesting ideas there, too.
He did. He believed that the soul is not just one simple thing.
Right.
It's complex, multifaceted,
With different parts.
3 parts: reason, spirit, and appetite.
And this idea is key to his whole concept of justice and virtue.
And the ideal state.
So break it down for us, these 3 parts of the soul.
Okay, so first you have reason,
Okay.
the rational part,
Huh.
responsible for our ability to think logically.
To reason things out.
Exactly, for critical thinking, pursuing truth and wisdom,
So that's the part of us that seeks to understand those forms.
and to live a life guided by reason.
So reason's kind of at the top then.
In the hierarchy of the soul, yes, ideally it governs the other parts.
Keeps everything in check.
Exactly.
And what about spirit?
So spirit is the emotional part,
Okay.
driven by ambition, courage, a desire for honor,
It's what motivates us.
to achieve, to protect, to stand up for what's right.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, not at all, as long as it's guided by reason.
Right. Kept in balance.
Right.
And lastly, appetite.
Appetite is all about pleasure,
Okay.
material possessions, satisfying those basic needs and desires,
That part of us that wants instant gratification.
and can lead us astray if we're not careful.
So this is the one that can cause the most trouble.
Potentially, yes, it can pull us away from virtue,
if it's not controlled.
Exactly. So for Plato, a just individual is
Yeah.
one whose soul is in harmony.
Everything working together,
Reason guiding those other parts.
making sure neither spirit nor appetite takes over.
And this harmony within the individual,
Right.
it's reflected in his vision of the just state.
Where each part of society plays its role,
Each class performing its function,
contributing to the overall good,
a well-functioning society.
like a well-functioning soul.
Precisely.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to touch on one last image from the Republic. The myth of
A vivid one.
It's a story Socrates tells,
Near the end,
offering a glimpse into what Plato thought happened after death.
this soldier, dies in battle,
Right.
but then miraculously comes back to life.
After 10 days.
10 days, and he tells this incredible story of his journey to a place where souls are
Judged after they die.
and then they get to choose their next life.
Wow, so they get to pick what happens next.
They do, based on the lives they lived before.
And the lessons they learn.
It emphasizes the importance of living a just life.
Because those choices matter.
They have consequences.
Not just here, but in the afterlife.
Those who lived well, guided by reason and virtue,
They choose wisely.
and get a better rebirth.
All the others.
Those who are unjust, they face a harsher fate.
So it's all connected.
Our actions have a lasting impact
On our souls.
in this life and beyond.
It's a powerful message.
It is. Living a virtuous life isn't just about rules or rewards.
It has eternal significance.
It shapes our very souls.
What a powerful way to end the Republic.
It really brings together those key themes.
The importance of justice, striving for a meaningful life,
Living in accordance with virtue.
and it's a testament to how relevant Plato still is today.
Even though he wrote centuries ago
He challenges us to think.
about justice, government, the human soul.
The pursuit of a good life.
Big questions.
Big questions indeed.
It's all about that enduring quest for a just and meaningful existence.
And on that note, we conclude our deep dive into Plato's Republic.
A fascinating journey.
We've explored his ideas, wrestled with those challenging concepts,
Hopefully you've come away with a new appreciation for its relevance.
and its power.
Its power, yes.
Until our next deep dive, keep those philosophical wheels turning.